You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
Next week I'm going to have a special episode reviewing the turquoise coast in Turkey and also my annual year in review. As well as this Travel Tales with Fergal podcast, I also have a monthly travel slot on Clare FM and Tip FM. So I'd just like to give you a taster of that today because I really enjoyed this episode as with Alan Morrissey in Clare FM, because it's a great example of what it's like, because I intended to talk about my favourite travel books, films, TV shows and podcasts, but we only got to get through books because we went off on many different tangents. So you can hear now about my favourite travel books and books I've been reading this year and many other things, and look forward to talking to you again next week.
Fergal O'Keefe was with us for this week's Travel Tales with Fergal. Have you ever forgotten, have you ever had a nightmare, Fergal, where maybe you've forgotten your passport, or because you do so much travelling, you have all of that down to a fine art? Maybe you have your checklist before you travel and you're very thorough and all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
Yeah, I do actually. But I did one time. It was actually, I think I might have said this before, but it was a World Cup in 2007. We were going over for the semi-finals to Paris, and when we arrived at Cork Airport, my wife realised that she had my son's passport instead of her own. So, and that was Aer Lingus, so they were lovely. They rescheduled for the next day, so I went on because I was okay. I had my passport.
You left her behind.
Yeah.
What a man.
And you know what? The first final was on. It was England against France, and I still go, it's like a running joke between me and my wife, because anytime something like this happens, it's always the best time I've ever had any time. So I went that first night and I went down around Saint-Germain area, and it was amazing. Like, France lost actually that semi-final, right, but the atmosphere going through the city was quite amazing actually. So that was a great night.
How much persuading did you have to do to head on ahead of your wife, or did she just turn around and you were gone?
Well, Joe, it was one of those situations where it was all very quick. There was no time for there was no time for debating. So yeah, I'd say it was, once I went through, I'd say Emer was wondering how that one worked out. But yeah, no, it all worked out okay in the end. She made it the next day.
She stuck with you and eventually forgave you, no doubt. Right, we'll move on, because you have been busy compiling your best of list, end of year, lots of stuff here. Do you want to start with the books, Fergal? Because it looks like you're a voracious reader.
But you know what? But even before that, actually, I just wanted to talk a quick thing about Ryanair, just about baggage, because I got an email yesterday from Ryanair about a flight in the summer, and it was very ambiguous about a baggage, because at the moment they're now saying that if you want to from a point of view of seats, so if you want to get a seat, they're now saying you have to queue up and actually get it at a desk, that you can't get the boarding pass from your app. But they actually haven't said anything about this in the media. It's just people that are arriving at the airport. And something, I was booking flights a couple of weeks ago for the summer, actually, to go from Shannon to Marseille, and I'd recommend it. There's some great deals there at the moment, and obviously going through Shannon is amazing. But I noticed a little hack when I was going through it, because when you're going through, they give you the option of getting baggage or buying your seats, and they have a number of different options. So the prices, they actually rate, like if you're putting a bag through and reserve your seat and getting priority, going on the plane, it's $24.75. They also have Family Plus, which is €32.99, so €33. And with Family Plus, the good thing about that is you can pay 50% at now and 50% later, and you also can put through, that's a 10k bag for each person, and also you can put through a 20k bag. And then there's $41.99, which is just plus. And the only thing I can see in the difference there is free check-in at the airport, which I didn't realise that there was a charge for check-in at the airport. They actually had that down, free check-in at the airport. So when I was going through this, because there's 6 of us, so even $24.75, that's per flight, per person.
God,
Or
that's
family sharing, it's 33 per flight per person. Can nearly work out as much as the flight. So I kind of just said no to all those things. The only thing that's free is if you can put a small bag under the seat. So if you go through to the end process, then you can actually check in a 10K bag and it's 16.99. So there is a saving there. Or well, actually, that's bring it. If you bring on a bag, if you check in a bag, it's 22.99. But with priority, and two bags, a carry-on bag and a thing at 16.90. So it's still a big saving, but they don't tell you that's an option unless you refuse the others and you go to it in the end. Now, and that's what I did. But then the only tricky thing now is now they're starting to say that you have to queue up to get random seat selection. So they're trying to get people. But I have a feeling that, you know, they're doing it at the moment. They're not really advertising it. I'd say they're feeling the waters, but I kind of think during the summer, I don't know if they're really going to make people queue up to get their boarding passes, because the whole point is they're trying to speed up the process, you know?
Yeah, you would think that would, aside from being maybe perhaps a little bit embarrassing for people having to queue up, it would maybe potentially lead to flights being slightly delayed, or certainly not arriving as quickly as they normally do.
Exactly. So there's huge, and I just went into their website there just to see about the pricing, and you know they had a thing up about you know, sleigh into winter, and I was going, oh wow, 15% off. They're offering discounts for skiing. So then when I went into it, the first place was Birmingham. So the options are UK, Poland, and Spain, which aren't exactly like
it's not the Alps.
Yeah, so they're quite amazing, you know. I mean that's a classic, like saying free check-in at the airport is one of the benefits.
Oh my word! Right, thanks for giving people a heads up on that. In terms of your books that have caught your eye and your imagination during the year, Fergal.
Exactly, and enjoy it. It's not even just during the year, but it's forever, because as you say, I'm always reading travel books, and what I love is anywhere I go, getting travel books for that area. And often travel books I consider kind of history books, travel books in a way as well, because often, you know, you're learning about the place and it really brings the place to life. And for example, like just say I was in Turkey this year, and a book I'd really recommend is called Farewell Antalya, which is a very famous book in Turkey. I think it was written in the 60s. It'd be considered a classic in Turkey, and it's all about the displacement of the Greeks from, say, that area, where the turquoise coast where I was, into Turkey, and the Turks from Greece back to Turkey. And so it's a brilliant book. So I think they always bring places alive. I suppose the top of my list for travel books, I is still for me is The Lonely Planet, which this year actually they celebrated their 50th anniversary. And you know, I have like shelves inside in the other room, like full of books. You know, anywhere I go, I always get Lonely Planets. And this year was my first time going to Turkey, so I went to Eason's to get a Lonely Planet for Turkey, and I couldn't get it, and I didn't have enough. I left it too late. I didn't have enough time to get it online, so I said I'd get it at the airport. But when I went to the airport, then there was no Lonely Planets. I mean, there was one actually. I can't even remember where it was for, but there was one Lonely Planet in Waterstones in Dublin Airport. So I thought it was quite amazing how things have changed so much now with everything, with access online. I still, when I came back from my holidays, ordered and got my Lonely Planet for my collection, because I just think they're brilliant, the Lonely Planets. Like for instance, that book Farewell Anatolia, they often have a section recommended readings for a country. That's where I discovered that book was recommended, or they give best places to go to. So I still recommend people, you know, and they have a great section in the front, the history section, which I think is amazing. So I'd really recommend people to still get those travel books, you know. Okay,
brilliant stuff. Any other books that your travel books you would highlight for people?
Do you know what, like there's a lot going on obviously in the Middle East at the moment, and one that I loved, I read this year, is Dom Joly, who is a comedian in the UK, and he's also a writer, and the book actually was called The Downhill Hiking Club. So I'd really recommend that one, because it's all about, he's got Lebanese origins, his family, so it's all about that, and it's hiking over the mountains above Beirut, and it's just an amazing book, and it really gives you a feel for that area. So I would really recommend that. And I suppose, you know, one of my favourite travel writers actually is A. Gill, who used to be he was the restaurant and travel writer with the Sunday Times. One of my favourite books is called Here and There, the collected travel writings. But there's loads of them, like A. Gill is Away is another one, and you can get them anywhere, and they are spectacular. I would say that he's actually one of my favourite travel writers.
Another one you wanted to mention is that's the late great A.A. Gill to another late great, that is Anthony Bourdain, who kind of mixed food with travel.
Exactly, and his first book was Kitchen Confidential, which is, I only read that during lockdown actually, and it's spectacular, really brilliant. And there's another book with Laurie Woolever, and that is out now, and that's based on his life with interviews with everybody that knew him, and that's a spectacular book. And I actually interviewed her for my own Travel Tales with Fergal, so I would really recommend that one. And I suppose my favourite travel book, this book actually, one of my favourite writers, he's a historian, but I also consider him a travel writer as well, is William Dalrymple. And one of his, I think it's his first book, it's called In Xanadu, and that was a journey on the Marco Polo Trail from Jerusalem to China, and it's a spectacular book. And he actually wrote it when he was in Cambridge in college. So he's obviously a very famous author now, but that book was just unbelievably well written. But the way, the evocative of talking about Jerusalem and Israel and that whole journey. So I'd really recommend him. And his other books like The Anarchy, and another book actually which I read when I was in Greece last year is a book called From the Holy Mountain, which I've seen him tweeting about now, because that's about the sort of the Orthodox Church in Greece and Eastern Europe and the Middle East as well. And it's a very topical subject now about, particularly in Jerusalem, about the Armenian Orthodox Church in Jerusalem, how they're being treated. And he was talking about that like 10 years ago. So it's called From the Holy Mountain. And he also talks about, he starts with him in Mount Athos, where I was. I talked about it on here before. It's a famous Greek Orthodox kind of semi-state in Greece. So he actually visited it there, and it just really brings the place alive. That's another example. When I'm somewhere reading about the place and getting the history, I think that's when you really get to know a place.
Any other writers or books that you would highlight for our listeners?
So the classic, I was just reading about an article about it the weekend, and it reminded me, is The Beach by Alex Copeland, which is a movie as well, which people will know with
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, and the book actually I actually think the film is really good as well. But the book, The Beach, it's still going. I don't know if it's an anniversary, but I remember travelling through Asia after that it came out, and this article was saying the same thing, and it's still happening supposedly, like that anyone who's traveling, they all have a copy of The Beach, and it's spectacular. But it's based in Thailand, and talking about the drug trade, etc. But it's amazing, beautifully written. Alex Herling, he's done loads of different movies since then, but that was his first book, so I'd really recommend that one. And then another guy who I love all his books, I suppose, is John Krakauer, who did Into the Wild, which is another film. Sean Penn directed it, but about going into the wild in Alaska and about this character, and he brought him to life. But his travels through America up to Alaska and going into the wild and into thin air is another one, because that's another subject I love, is about Everest and anything to do with the Himalayas. And that book was about a disaster, and there's been a few since in Everest. And another one is Joe Simpson, who also talked about Touching the Void, about a climbing disaster and getting down. I love those sort of books, so I would really recommend those ones. And then I suppose another one is Bill Bryson. Anything by Bill Bryson. I mean, Down Under is probably one of his most famous ones, but any of his, Tales from a Small Island was one of his first ones about the UK, and he's brilliant the way he just brings, he's so funny, and his writing is amazing the way he brings countries to get, a life. So they're sort of the ones that I would really recommend. And then just from this year, there was one called A Thing of Beauty. It was another one about, it's about mythology and modern Greece. Peter Fiennes is his name, A Thing of Beauty. So that came out this year, and I'd really recommend it. Even going to Greece. And actually, just before I came on, I got another email. We were talking about lists. And on the email, it was it was Condé Nast Traveller about most Googled countries this year, and Greece was number one. And fully enough, Ireland actually didn't make the list, which was kind of surprising. I thought Ireland would be on it, but the most Googled countries, so Greece was number one. So it went from Morocco, number 10, Malta, Egypt, Thailand, Cyprus, Croatia, Portugal, Italy, Spain, and Greece to Ireland. And I also did most Googled cities. And the only one on the list from Ireland was Cork. And that was in at number 9. And La Rochelle was in at number 6. But I'm always a bit suspicious about these lists because Rhodes, the island in Greece, so it was cities and islands for some reason. And Rhodes was number 1.
Right. Well, I'd say Dublin might have made it onto the most Google list, albeit for the wrong reasons, quite recently.
Yeah, that's true. But it was interesting that Cork was on it. I've seen a few articles actually about Cork. It's kind of getting very popular, but
that won't go to their heads though, Fergal. It'll be grand.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably Cork people were Googling themselves. Yeah. And that's what caused that.
Just time for one more. I know you're a fan of Tom Holland, the historian who's written a couple of books. Well, he's written a good few books. And the two you want to mention are two I have myself and can also give the 2 thumbs up to.
Yeah, so Persian Fire is one, and Crossing the Rubicon. Crossing the Rubicon is about the Roman Empire, and Persian Fire is about the Persian Empire, and both of them are amazing. And actually, I would really recommend. He is the rest. People might know the rest is history podcast, and that was I know did started doing that. Like if you go anywhere, they will have done like a series on that country, and that really it's amazing. So even if you're not into reading books, the podcast version and I mentioned William Dalrymple, he has one called Empire as well now, and he kind of focuses a lot on India and also the Middle East. But again, it's brilliant because I was on this year, I'd be walking up and down the beach and listening to these podcasts about the area you're in, about the history, and it really brings us alive, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. I have to say I'm a big fan of the Rest is History podcast, particularly the series on the Irish Revolutionary period, and I'm currently listening to the one they did on JFK. It's fantastic, although last night I woke up in the middle of the night with one of the episodes still playing, so I think I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to it.
I actually saw, because I saw someone tweeting the other day that that was their, I haven't listened to that one actually, and they said that was their best series
out
fantastic. Of all. So I'd and do you know what? I was over ambitious on all the best lists I'd be talking about today. So we'll do that another time. But travel podcasts and history podcasts, we'll talk about that, and films and TV shows. So we've plenty to talk about next year.
Oh, we do. And of course, I listen to The Rest is History after the Travel Tales of Fergal podcast, which you should check out as well.
That mention that one as well.
Goes without saying. Fergal, thank you so much for some brilliant suggestions there, and also for all your excellent travel advice throughout the year. Hope the O'Keeffes have a very good Christmas and New Year. Will you be making it back to Clare at any stage?
Of course, yeah. I was there at the weekend, so it was great. It was fabulous. The town was buzzing, I have to say. Looked great.
Good stuff. Well, look, mind yourself.
Like I'm like the prodigal son. Every time I go home, I get all my mates out. So, I'm a bit like Taylor Swift. You know the way the economy goes up when you go.
Just like the Swifties, the O'Keeffes, they'll all be lining up to hang out with you over the Christmas, Fergal.
Exactly. Yeah. Ended up in Nora Culligan's.
You'll see him at the bar, folks. Fergal, thanks very much, and see you in 2024.
Take care.
The great Fergal O'Keeffe.
I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. Please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal. Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.